Hey everyone, Minutia Minute here, coming at you guys with another week in the 365 movie challenge, in which I watch a movie for every day of the year in 2022 and bring you my reviews on this channel every Sunday. This week, I decided I was going to really scrape the bottom of the barrel and dig into video game movies. Now, I don't think I've ever seen a video game movie that I truly thought was like a quality film. I've enjoyed some video game movies, but that really has just been because I enjoy video games, and sometimes I get a kick out of watching the movie versions of games that I've played. The thing that spurred it on this week is the fact that Uncharted is coming out, so you'll notice this video is only going to have 6 reviews in it, because as of the recording of this, I have not seen Uncharted yet, but I will be back within a day or two with my thoughts on the Uncharted movie starring Tom Holland. I'm a big fan of the Uncharted games, and I remember 15 years ago now when my tastes were significantly more shallow than they are now, um, playing the original Uncharted and wishing that I could go out and watch a movie based on the adventures of Nathan Drake. So probably the first video game movie that I'm gonna go see in theaters, that I'm actually excited to watch, albeit kind of guilty pleasure excited, since Resident Evil 2 in like 2004. But can't wait to go see that. I will be bringing that review for you guys here in the next couple of days. Meanwhile, we're going to look back on 5 video game movies that I've never seen before, and then one that is my rewatch and also kind of a cheat, full transparency, but we'll get to that when we get to it. The question is, do any of these movies break the video game curse? Are any of these movies actually good as movies and not just as video game adaptations or video game fanboy garbage? Well, stay tuned to find out. I actually decided to rank all 6 of these movies least favorite to most favorite, and I'm going to present them to you this week, worst to best. So first up, bottom of the barrel this week by far has to go to, and not surprisingly so, Monster Hunter. I don't know if any of you guys have seen this movie. It is Milla Jovovich and Paul W.S. Anderson, who made all the Resident Evil movies together, have teamed up to bring us another video game franchise in this Monster Hunter film. And for anyone who's interested in seeing it, this did come with a digital code that you are welcome to redeem. Have at it. So the question is, why exactly is this movie terrible? And the fact of the matter is, there's 2 reasons. First of all, purely from like a film standpoint, it's riddled with directorial cliches, horrible writing, bland characters, all the things you kind of expect from a video game movie. But the thing that really lets this movie down is, even if you're a Monster Hunter fan, I don't know how you're going to get any enjoyment out of this movie. Now, the only Monster Hunter game I've played is Monster Hunter World, which I played with a friend who lives out in California. It was just something we did together for a summer. And so my knowledge of this game franchise is somewhat limited, but basically the premise is you live in a medieval fantasy world. The culture is somewhat feudal or tribal. I don't quite know how you would describe it. And you go out, you find monsters, you fight those monsters, you bring the spoils of the battle back, you get money to upgrade your armor, upgrade your weapons, and then go fight bigger monsters. That's all there is to it. The big sin of this movie is they presume that you're going to see this movie, you have no idea what Monster Hunter is, and you're not going to be interested in a fantasy setting, so you're going to set it in Iraq with a bunch of, like, Marines, and then they're going to get transported to the world of Monster Hunter. I don't understand how in a post-Lord of the Rings, post-The Hobbit universe, any filmmaker thinks that that's necessary. And all of the hoorah Marine bullshit in this movie is unbelievably annoying and distracting. Probably the only thing I enjoyed in this was Ron Perlman, who shows up looking ridiculous and acting ridiculously. But all in all, this movie's a hard pass, whether you're a fan of the video game or just a fan of movies. There's really no reason to visit it. Kind of a shockingly good cast. You've got Tony Jaa, Tip Harris, Megan Good, Diego Boneta, and Ron Perlman, as I said. So certainly a lot of talent in this movie, but not a lot of talent in this movie. So skip Monster Hunter, worst movie I watched by far, and immediately made me regret going down this rabbit hole to begin with. Next up, we have another movie from Screen Gems, executive produced by Paul W.S. Anderson. We have the reboot of Resident Evil. This is Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City, directed by Johannes Roberts, who I actually enjoyed 47 Meters Down and the sequel, which I think he directed the sequel too. But they were kind of fun shark movies, pretty generic, but overall well made. So I was curious to see what he did with the Resident Evil franchise. And everyone who saw it told me it was going to be horrible, which may have led to my enjoyment of the movie, actually, because I went in with absolutely bottom of the barrel expectations and found that, I don't know, it wasn't bad. To me, it was probably better than any of the Paul W.S. Anderson Resident Evil movies, with the exception of maybe the first one. But this one is certainly very slavish to the Resident Evil franchise. If you like the games, this has got a lot of those elements in it. Literally lifted directly from the video games. It kind of combines the first two games in an interesting way that I thought was clever. So if you're a Resident Evil fan, I feel like there's a lot to enjoy in this movie. Now, from a film fan's perspective, of course, there's not going to be that much in here. The fact of the matter is Resident Evil, is a ripoff of good horror movies in video game form, and then this is a ripoff of a video game that's ripping off movies. So, like, you're only going to get so much out of this, but if you like the Resident Evil iconography, like, I don't know, you might get something out of it. And this one also has a digital code in it, so if you want to dig in, help yourself. I forgot to mention, this stars the actress, I don't know her name, but the lady right here, she plays the main character in Crawl, the alligator in the basement movie, which I really liked her in it. So that was one reason to watch this. It was kind of cool to see her in something else. I hadn't seen her in anything else before. Okay, next, running right in the middle of the pack for me, was the Tomb Raider reboot, which, it's funny, this is now the second reboot of a video game movie franchise we've looked at, which is kind of crazy to think about, that video game movies have been relevant/irrelevant for that long, that we're now getting reboots. This is very specifically based on the Tomb Raider re-envisioning that happened in the mid-2010s. It stars Alicia Vikander as the titular Tomb Raider. And this is another movie that actually gets a lot of hate. I was looking at it online, and nobody seems to like this movie either, which I felt like was kind of unfounded. So once again, we've got to look at it from, a video game fan perspective and then also a movie fan perspective. So from a video game standpoint, it's not completely true to the story from that video game, but it pulls a lot of the elements out of it. It changes the ending, which is disappointing, to be sure. If you've played that game and you know the ending to this, you probably know what I'm talking about. I don't know, it's probably 50-50. Like, some people probably are okay with it. Some people, I'm sure, hate it. I was fine with it. Now, looking at it from a film fan perspective, I think there's actually kind of a lot to enjoy in this. Of course, it's going to be a derivative Indiana Jones ripoff. Like, again, that's what Tomb Raider the game is, and so it's hard to fault the movie for also going down that route. I'm sure Uncharted is going to do exactly the same thing when I go see that. But what struck me about this was, like, overall, it's competently directed. They've got a very good cast. Alicia Vikander, I think, is an excellent actress and really well cast as the Tomb Raider. She got super fit to play this role. They show it off on camera. She's very ripped for someone who's probably like 5'1" and like 100 pounds soaking wet. But there's actually a fair amount of like good production value in this, some decent sets, some real stunt work that's actually pretty impressive, intermixed with a lot of, kind of terrible CGI stunts that don't work for me. But I actually would say this was a more enjoyable experience overall than like the last Indiana Jones film. It had more stunts in it that were exciting to me. There's a bicycle chase at the very beginning of the movie that is a little corny, but if you're just like enjoying the bicycle chase through downtown London, the actual stunt work and production value of it is, in my opinion, actually pretty top notch. So yeah, overall, I actually found myself enjoying this one quite a bit, even from a filmmaker standpoint, which, again, I get it. It's somewhat of a derivative premise, but, there are a lot of tomb raiding type Indiana Jones ripoff movies out there that can be fun, and I think it's unfair to criticize this movie for kind of going down that path, considering how well executed it is overall. The only thing that really took me out of the movie was in the games, there's a focus on puzzle solving and like a lot of like rock climbing around to get to different areas and, jumping puzzles, that kind of thing. Those moments are in this movie and they're kind of like showcased because those are things that you do in the game, not necessarily because you needed to see it in the context of the greater action taking place in the narrative of the film. So that was definitely a hit against it, but relatively minor if you are in kind of an Indiana Jones mood but want to watch something a little different. You really could do worse than checking out this Tomb Raider movie. And once again, digital code for you guys, so have at it. Okay, so we are officially down to the last 3 movies that I've looked at, and all 3 of these I actually genuinely liked and would recommend. Whether you're a video game fan or not, there's a lot of enjoyment to be had in these next 3 movies, in my opinion. So first up, and I'm almost embarrassed to say this, Sonic's actually a lot of fun to watch. So, I almost went to go see this. It came out right before the pandemic hit. It had a lot of good word of mouth, not least of which because Jim Carrey is in it, back playing that 90s Jim Carrey over-the-top character. Everyone I talked to who saw the movie said that they enjoyed it, but I just couldn't get past the fact that, it's a Sonic the Hedgehog movie. And the fact of the matter is, like, it's not really a Sonic the Hedgehog movie, it's a road trip movie. So, like, if you're into road trip movies with 2 sort of mismatched characters that, slowly develop a bromance throughout the course of the film, like that kind of a thing, you might find some enjoyment in Sonic the Hedgehog. I think the unsung hero of this movie is James Marsden, who, is acting against a tennis ball the whole movie, basically. He actually does a really, really good job conveying emotion against this, 3D digital cartoon. Now, in no way is it on the level of, like, Bob Hoskins in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but they also aren't swinging for the fences either. Like, they're focused on playing to their strengths. James Marsden plays kind of a, gee whiz, gosh wow, small town police officer. And so the relationship they build is very gee whiz, gosh wow as well. It's not like a super heavy performance, but what's there is actually very convincing and appropriate to the material that's in it. Now, obviously, I already said people were super excited about Jim Carrey being in this. And there's not much I can say that anybody else hasn't already said about it. He plays this, over-the-top, pompous, scientist, evil maniac. And the movie's filled with a bunch of really corny jokes that come from him that would not be funny at all unless they were delivered by Jim Carrey in that 1995 Riddler kind of a way. I'd be curious to know, for people who didn't grow up with Jim Carrey, if that shtick actually works or it's just something that I'm nostalgic for. But for me, Jim Carrey, James Marsden, and the actor who plays the voice of Sonic really brought this movie together in a way that is truly beyond, the sum of its parts. Is it a video game movie? Barely. To me, it's more of a road trip movie with a video game pastiche kind of laid over the top of it, which is maybe why this movie's a little bit more successful than your average video game movie for me. Oh wait, and I forgot, drumroll, yet another digital code for you guys. Now, my runner-up of the week, genuinely a great hidden gem movie. Anyone watching this movie who likes movies should give this movie a watch. I'm sad to say, doesn't come with a digital code, and I think is only available to watch through like Showtime or something like that, like Showtime or buy it, which super sucks because I think that more people should check this movie out, and it is Werewolves Within. This is a video game that I've never played, but I am aware of it. It's basically set in, a medieval town. Someone is a werewolf, and you have to figure out who the werewolf is. I think it's probably all multiplayer. I think it's a VR game, I know that. But that's kind of the extent of my knowledge of it. This movie very loosely borrows from the video game. It really only borrows from it in the core premise that everyone is in a town together and one of them's a werewolf and they're trying to figure out which person it is. But instead of being set in a medieval town, it's set in modern day in a small town with like a local ski lodge that everybody's kind of holed up at together, and it's all them just accusing each other of being a werewolf. And if I'm being honest, when you find out who the werewolf is, it's not going to blow your mind. Like, you're not going to be surprised at all, I would suspect. I was not surprised in the least bit. But what this movie has going for it is competent direction. It's funny when it needs to be funny, but it also has atmosphere when it needs to have atmosphere, which seems to be something movies struggle with these days. But then on top of that, this movie is spectacularly cast. The characters, as written, are very well drawn, and the people they got to play them play those roles to a T. Everyone is eccentric in kind of a weird way, and all of them very dynamically bounce off of each other in ways that just makes it really fun to hang out in this cabin with these people and watch them all bicker. That is where this movie's strength lies. It calls itself a whodunit on the box art, but really it's a hangout movie. Like, it's just a fun hangout movie with some great character actors all bouncing off of each other. The werewolf in this is almost incidental, really. And you can tell they had no budget for this movie, and so the werewolf effects certainly leave something to be desired. But again, the direction in this is very smart, and they utilize their budget intelligently. They show the werewolf when it makes sense and not 1 second longer. And all in all, this is really an excellent example of how to make a movie on a budget with a genuine level of quality, finesse, that doesn't take its audience for granted at all. So Werewolves Within officially is the first video game movie that I immediately wanted to watch again after watching it for the first time, and B, genuinely a great movie, and anyone should go check this movie out. And as you can see, like, you can barely tell it's a video game movie by the cover. Alright, so we're 5 movies in, only one more left to go. What could beat out Werewolves Within? Well, as I said at the beginning of the video, there is a little bit of a cheat in the list of movies I watched this week, and it came in the form of my rewatch, and it is none other than the movie that was going to be impossible for any video game movie to beat, and that's Scott Pilgrim versus the World. I was really excited to give this movie a rewatch, and I had never seen it in 4K. The last time I watched this movie was on... Oh, actually, I don't know if I've seen this on home video at all. I might have only seen this in the theater. If I did see it at home, I think it was on DVD. So it's genuinely been a really long time since I revisited this, and I was really curious to see how it was going to hold up. Now, when this movie came out, it was kind of a bomb and has since become, a huge cult favorite. So there's not a whole lot I can say about this movie that is going to surprise anyone or be something that you haven't already heard before. So I'm going to keep this relatively brief. Suffice it to say, this movie completely held up for me. It was actually better than I remember it being. Although I think in my head, I always think, oh yeah, Scott Pilgrim, that's a great movie. But then emotionally, I think of Nick and Nora's Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, or whatever that movie was called, which is a movie that I did not like, and so I conflate the two, and I always end up skipping watching Scott Pilgrim, which is a huge mistake because this movie is fantastic. Now, obviously it's based on a comic book, but obviously there's a lot of video game tropes in this, a lot of video game references, so I felt like this was an honorable choice, and honestly, I knew I needed to watch something that I was gonna like, knowing that I was probably not going to like most of the other movies that I watched this week. Now, as it turns out, this ended up being a really nice cap on the whole week, because overall, I genuinely enjoyed 4 of the 6 movies that I've watched this week. We'll have to see if Uncharted can rise towards the top of the list. I will certainly let you know where it falls once I've gotten the chance to go out and see it and get my review posted for you guys. In the meantime, our last digital code of the day. This is certainly a movie worth watching if you haven't seen it, so snag that code up and give it a watch. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this week's reviews for the 365 movie challenge. I know this is Probably not going to get that many views because, you know, these types of movies are just so infamous and people know that they're going to be bad. Which is unfortunate because there actually is some good stuff to be had in video game movies. But if they can put out more movies like this, you never know. Maybe video game movies can become like a socially accepted genre that is worth taking seriously. You know, it took 50 years for comic book movies to be taken seriously, and look where we are now with that. So here's hoping that Hollywood can continue to figure it out. In the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and I hope you guys have a great week in movies. Thanks for watching.